Hey guys, we are back updating the power rankings for Survivor 45 following episode 3, and this was a really fun episode. I mean, we got a lot of great moments, we got a pretty fun tribal, obviously, and we now know that we're getting a swap next episode, which I've been really clamoring for. So I feel like the season is on the right track so far, and I feel like we're definitely getting set up to a pretty solid season here. But with that, we have 16 players to look at, and let's not waste any more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 16, we have the boot from this week, and here we have Sabaya. And obviously, this was a pretty fun downfall for Sabaya here. Now, I never was that high on her in my power rankings. I recognize that she was one of the bigger characters, but I feel like with her opposition to Emily, I feel like she was probably going to be on the losing side of that. Though with that said, I wasn't entirely expecting it to happen in this episode coming into it. Though once the episode started, I felt like it was pretty blatant where we did talk about her like saying like that the saying "no leave no man behind" doesn't apply here given how weak Brandon is, and that she doesn't dislike Emily, but is still someone that she wants to keep her eye on. Obviously, we get some pretty interesting stuff happening here, particularly like with her wanting to flip the vote onto Caleb. And I feel like once Lulu lost the challenge, it became pretty clear that she was going to fail at flipping the vote on Caleb here due to their relationship with Emily. And I feel like she was probably going to be taken out because of that. And sure enough, that is what happened. Though at the same time, it was very entertaining to watch where she brought the waxing to tribal, threw it right into the fire, which I was thinking about as a possibility last week. But she does it here. She literally cooks the idol, literally takes it out. And then we see her reading like the provisions of it in the voting booth. And to me, it felt pretty clear what was going to happen here. She was going to sacrifice her vote, thinking that it wouldn't matter, but then she gets blindsided, and that's what happens here. And on the whole, I feel like Sabaya was a very interesting figure across these early episodes here. I do feel like it was probably the wrong move for her to target Caleb in the first place, as I feel like she had a better relationship with him compared to Emily. And even outside that, I feel like it was just way too soon to be talking about taking out big threats, especially when you're losing all these challenges here. But obviously, we saw Sabaya go out here, which is why she's here at number 16. And before we continue, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Russell Muscle TV, who I'm partnering up with this season to promote Idle Plays. Idle Plays is an online shop where you can purchase Survivor puzzles so you can practice them and be just like Carson from Survivor 44. We got all different selections here, including the fire puzzle, the snake to the top puzzle, the 5-piece puzzle that Spencer solved in 5 seconds from Survivor Cambodia, and more. If you want to take home Survivor puzzles made by superfans for superfans, feel free to click the link in the description and start shopping now. And with that, there are 15 players left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think they are to win based off their edit and current game position. But at number 15, we have the same person that I had at the bottom of last week, and here we have J Maya, who pretty much got nothing here. Now, I do feel like it was a bit of a knock that she was shown like catching like the whole alliance, looking for the idol, and she literally doesn't get a confessional about it at all. Like, she's just seen as this obstacle, like, oh, J Maya walked by, what do we do? All the focus was on the likes of Julie and Dee here, and I feel like that just exemplifies J Maya's game to me, where I feel like she's just not an important character. I feel like she's not gonna have really any win equity whatsoever, despite her confessional last episode suggesting that she was going to be this more strategic thinker. So I feel like it's for all those reasons that I just have no confidence in J Maya to win, and because of that, she is here number 15. Now moving on to number 14, and we have another player that I feel like has no shot of winning at this point, and here we have Bruce. Now this was actually a pretty quiet episode for Bruce. He doesn't really get any confessionals here. And while we do get a brief check-in with Katurah about how she still wants to target him in the future, I feel like there wasn't really much advancement with that storyline. I feel like he's probably going to be in it for a bit. Now, with the swap coming, it'll be very interesting to see if Bruce and Katurah are still in the same tribe together, as I feel like if they aren't, they're probably going to make the merge, as I feel like Katurah is being set up to take out Bruce. So I feel like that'll be interesting to see, like if they are on similar tribes or not next episode. But again, I feel like there's just no way this guy is getting too much further into game beyond the early merge, in my view. And even outside of that, I feel like he's been dunked on too much. He doesn't have the edit, and because of that, he is here number 14. Now moving on to number 13, and we have a player that I feel pretty similar about, but here we have Sifu. Now, Sifu did get a pretty fun moment here where he was pretending to play the guitar, like when they were putting on that performance in front of Caleb, but really outside of that, he doesn't really get much here. And sort of similar to Bruce, he kind of gets undermined here, where we see at one point Drew throwing him under the bus, claiming that he was the one digging in the spot they were looking at for an idol, and that's just what prompted them to also dig in that spot. So again, there just isn't much that moves the needle here, and if anything, it's probably slightly negative. But again, really, I feel like this episode didn't really change my opinion of Sifu. He's not winning, and because of that, he is here number 13. Now moving on to number 12, and we have another player that I feel very similarly about compared to last week, and here we have Sean. And to me, this episode was more of the same. We get a confessional from him after the reward challenge about how they're no longer the Lulu losers after finally winning a challenge for once. Like, he talks about Emily changing her mind and like being a better person, feels like that she can work with her, only to then tell Sabaya that he's with Sabaya all the way. And then obviously, like, he's part of the plan to try to blindside Caleb. That backfires, and he seemed to be in a pretty bad spot after this tribal, where chances are, if there's no swap and they go back to tribal, then he's pretty much screwed here, obviously. But with there being a swap, there's probably more life for him moving forward. But again, I feel like edit-wise, this episode was just more of the same for him, not too much positive, and most of it is just narrating something that really anyone could narrate, if you ask me. So I feel like it's for all those reasons I can't have him any higher. He's here at number 12. Now moving on to number 11, and we have another player that I'm kind of unchanged on compared to last week, and here we have Brando. Now obviously last week was better for Brando, where we got a bit more focus on him, but I feel like he just went right back down to where he was before, where most of his content is about Kelly and how they're in the middle. Though at the same time, Kelly's the one getting more of the focus there, which I don't particularly like. Now, we did hear a little bit from him about him telling her that he has a hard time reading Katurah, which he agrees with, but real outside that, there's just not much content there. I feel like, if anything, like, he's probably going to be a relatively under-edited character in the near future, which doesn't bode well for his chances. I don't really see him winning either, and because of that, he is here number 11. Now moving on to number 10, and I debated whether this person is too high, but this was technically a good episode for them. But here we have Jake. And the main thing about Jake is that we did finally get some positive content from him, where like we obviously saw him black out early on, which obviously was a bit of a fake out there, was perfect promo material. But then after that, like, we do see his relationship with Kendra start to blossom, where she starts to come around to him. She admits to him that she targeted him early on because he's a lawyer. And at this point, like, it seems like he's probably in a better spot. Now, at the end of the day, the fact that we're only getting this now in episode 3 is a bit of a red flag. Even outside that, I feel like Jake himself didn't get to talk too much about this. I feel like a lot of it was on Kendra's end here. So I feel like there just isn't too much to, like, look upon here. But again, it was still slightly positive content here. I feel like my opinion of Jake's game and his chances are a bit higher than they were before, which is more than I can say about the people we already talked about. But again, I still don't really see him winning either. It's just the fact that he got a more positive episode that makes him a little bit higher in my view, which is why he is here at number 10. Now moving on to number 9, and we have another player that I feel pretty similar about compared to last week, and here we have Julie. And Julie's been a bit weird to me, where she's gotten a consistent presence, she's gotten confessionals in all 3 episodes, but I feel like within that there just isn't that much depth to it. And I feel like this episode is very much the case, where she was definitely on the screen a lot. She was obviously spending a lot of time with Dee as their alliance is looking for the idol. But again, I feel like most of the focus there is on Dee. Dee's the one getting most of these confessionals as they're looking for the idol, as they're going through like the fact that Austin and Drew are lying, and then ultimately coming together after they do find the idol. And I feel like that's a bit of a knock for her. And even outside of that, like, a lot of her confessionals are very baseline. I mean, like, she explains how the raid works. She talks about how Caleb's a player, which is a bit of a good confessional, but also something that other people have highlighted as well. And obviously the fact that he came to their tribe to get information. But really outside of that, I feel like a lot of her content is very underwhelming for me. I feel like so many other players are getting more focus than her, even though she's still getting a decent amount of screen time. And I feel like because of that, I can't really have her too much higher than here. Though again, compared to the other players, I feel like she has a bit more going on within the game. But again, there's just not enough to justify her being a top contender, which is why she's here at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and this person has actually dropped quite a bit from last week. Now, I did have this person one spot higher when I was initially putting this list together. However, after thinking about it, I just don't feel that great about them anymore. But here we have Kelly. And I feel like Kelly's edit has been really weird to think about. Where on paper it seems to be good. I mean, like she gets lots of strategic content. We have a relationship with Brando. She talks a lot about playing the middle. However, it's framed as almost like a negative thing, almost like she's afraid to be in this spot. Where last week, like we got her confessional about like how like she doesn't want to go to tribal because then the hammer will come down. Like she doesn't want to draw that line in the sand. And we got another confessional in this episode about, again, she's in the middle right now, but she doesn't want to actually go to tribal and exercise that middle position because then she'll have to pick a side and she's going to end up pissing some people off. She compares it to being in the hot seat. And to me, that just doesn't bode well in terms of her chances because it makes me feel like she's gonna eventually misplay this spot whenever she does go to tribal. Like maybe she'll pick the wrong side and choose to side with the guys over the women that seem to be a bit more faithful to her. And through that, she could be in a bad spot there. She could just end up misplaying the thing entirely, or maybe she'll shirk away from it. I just feel like the way this all is being framed makes me feel like she's being set up for a fall here. Now, again, I could just be misreading this, but I feel like based off the way this has been presented, not only in this episode, but the last episode as well, I'm just not feeling that great about Kelly at this point. And mixing that in with the fact that this is her only content, the fact that we don't get really anything else from her in this episode, or really the episodes before that, I'm just starting to go down on Kelly more and more, which is why I do have her here at number 8. Now we're moving on to number 7, and we have someone that has actually moved up one spot from last week, and here we have Austin. And I feel like Austin's been characterized pretty consistently, like he doesn't have anything too dramatic in terms of his content here. I feel like a lot of his content has either been focused on his alliance or with him looking for this beware advantage, which obviously comes to a head here where he gets the entire alliance to help him find the beware advantage and obviously end up getting the idol in the process. And again, I feel like it's pretty clear that this alliance is going to be a pretty major force in the season. And I feel like just through that just benefits Austin a lot more. And I could see a world where he has a relatively deep run. But at the same time, I feel like this content, like, while it is definitely consistent, I still question how circumstantial it all is. And mixing that in with the fact that I just don't see Winner right now when I see him. I just feel like he's going to be like a big character across the season. I feel like that was enough to where I couldn't quite justify putting him any higher, though I could definitely see a world where he does. But for now, I do have him here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and this is another person that I very much debated, as I feel like we definitely got some negative content from this person in this episode. However, I did decide to lead them a little bit higher here, even though I don't feel like they're actually going to win, and here we have Caleb. And obviously, Caleb was the secondary target for the week, where Sabaya came very close to blindsiding him. Even though I never felt like there was any serious shot that he was going home, he still got some like questionable content, like we got him on Reba, for instance, where people recognized that he was a player. Like people called him charismatic, they called him a salesman even. And to me, like I feel like the fact that people are picking up on the fact that Caleb is like here not just for like the stuff, but also to gain information and to build allies, I feel like that's definitely something that can lead to his downfall later on. And obviously, while he does stay here and while he has his relationship with Emily, which I feel like is pretty good, I feel like Emily is the one being set up more to eventually outgrow Caleb at some point. I feel like while he's getting a lot of strategic content, I feel like it's just going to eventually result in him being a big player. And with that, he'll probably be taken out around the mid game. I feel like my overall assessment of Caleb hasn't changed too much, but again, I feel like with other players changing in my view of them, I feel like that just naturally led to Caleb still being relatively high here, even though I just don't see how he wins, if you ask me, which is why he's here number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and this person did technically move down from last week. However, I still feel like they're probably going to be a big character in the season, and here we have Kendra, who obviously had a pretty weird development here where she ended up going from not trusting Jake because he's a lawyer to feeling protective of Jake, and we see them bond and they're building their relationship. And while I probably would not this to a degree, considering we didn't get more set to this earlier, I mean, we did kind of, like where we did see Kendra in episode 1 talking about how she wanted to target Jake due to being a lawyer. And it's very possible that this could have just been the actual turning point in their relationship, sort of similar to what we saw with Caleb and Emily last episode. So I still feel like she's going to be like a big character across the season. The reason I don't have her higher is I feel like there are bigger characters in terms of their edits. I feel like their edits are probably better than Kendra's, whereas I feel like Kendra has been getting a pretty consistent presence so far, which is pretty good, but I feel like I'm more impressed with the top 4, which is why she's here number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and I did struggle with this one as well, but we actually had the person I had in number 1 last week, and here we have Katurah. And I struggle with Katurah as well. I feel like I'm not liking the amount of focus she's getting on her rivalry with Bruce, even though I feel like she's going to be on the winning side of that. But I feel like with her like not getting too much in this episode aside from that, where she wants to just validate anything negative people say about Bruce, you also have to factor in the swap, where it's possible that come the swap, that Katurah and Bruce could be on the same tribe. And if that's the case, then it's possible that Katurah could just take up Bruce in that spot and sort of resolve that storyline, which is a bit of a worrying prospect for me, especially with the amount of focus she's been getting on that end. And plus, I feel like the top 3 players have more well rounded edits, if you ask me, which is why I kind of struggle with Katurah. Now, I still see her as a contender. I mean, just inherently, based on her premiere and everything, and also the fact that I feel like she's probably going to win this battle against Bruce. But again, I feel like I was a bit underwhelmed by her episode this week, which is why she is here at number 4. Now, moving on to number 3, and we have another player that has kind of gone up over the past week, and here we have Emily. Now, Emily is someone that I've been hearing a lot of people online talking about her being the top contender, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think at this point, Emily has a case to be the winner when you factor in like the season's themes about her being herself. And I feel like with her like journey over the course of the season, while having a journey edit in itself isn't great, I feel like with the theme of the season, I don't entirely discount the possibility that Emily could be a winner here. Now, at the same time, I do also worry that she could follow this trend of like the Carolins, where she has a very strong edit early on, but then starts to peter out around the merge here. So I don't entirely discount the possibility that she could be a winner, but I still have hesitations, to say the least, with actually putting her at number 1. Now, she had a pretty interesting episode here where she obviously gets her shot in the dark back from Sabaya, and she said that if they lose immunity again, unless something crazy happens, she's going to play the shot in the dark. Sure enough, something crazy does happen, and she doesn't use the shot in the dark. So I feel like that was pretty interesting on her end here. And you do have to give her some credit here for telling Caleb that he was the one being targeted here, which I think is also a knock against Caleb's edit. The fact that he didn't recognize that he was being targeted until very late is pretty bad on his end, especially when people are propping him up for being so strategic earlier. I do worry about that, but it also helps Emily to a degree. I feel like she deserves a lot of the credit here for ensuring that Caleb knew about this plan and that they were going to flip the vote into Sabaya, which I think is the optimal move here, as I feel like by doing that, it just puts her in the majority if they go back to tribal, tribe swap notwithstanding. So I still feel like she got a good episode here. I feel like she's probably going to be a big character across the season. And again, I don't discount the possibility that she could be number 1 secretly. It's just that I feel like the top 2 people have a bit more going on. I feel like they have like more of a case to be the winners at this point, and I feel like they're just naturally the people that I gravitate more towards as well, even though I'll admit I could be surprised if it does turn around to Emily by the end, but for now, I do have to leave her here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and we actually have the same person I had at number 2 last week, and here we have Drew. And I actually feel like this was a good episode for him. Now, obviously, we did see him getting caught by Julie and Dee when they were looking for the idol. He admits how awkward it was and that he needs to do damage control. But despite him and Austin getting caught, like, it's never really presented as a negative. While we do see Dee talking confessional about how weird they're acting, I mean, it does ultimately wrap back around to this group getting tighter due to them like working together to find the idol, and by the end them affirming the fact that their alliance is real, that they're genuine, and that they're actually going to go deep into the game. So I feel like Drew still got a pretty positive episode here. He does get to prop up Caleb to a degree, calling him charismatic, persuasive, and a salesman. He figures that he would just smooth them into giving away all their stuff, even though he doesn't necessarily. Though he does manage to get the advantage from Caleb as well, that in turn that he plans to use on Austin here, which does make me wonder, like, if Austin sacrifices his vote, like, due to the rules of the new idol, can Drew just play the advantage to, like, negate that sacrifice altogether? And I guess I got a follow-up question, like, what happens if they never go to tribal before the merge? Like, would he only need to sacrifice 1 vote then? I feel like there are definitely some unanswered questions about here, this idol thing, but that's besides the point. I feel like Drew is still going to be a top contender moving forward. I do feel like it was a quieter-ish episode, and I feel like more of his content was circumstantial compared to like what it was last week, obviously, which makes me feel like his spiking content wasn't as bad as a whole. Though I still feel like I had that same concern about him moving forward. I feel like he's going to be like the Omer of the season. He's going to be the Jesse of the season, which again, I feel like I would feel wrong putting him at number one because of that, but I still feel like this was a good enough episode for him, which is why he is here at number two. And now, at number one, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor 45 right now is D. Now, I'll admit, I've been pretty high on D during a lot of the season. I know there's definitely disagreement online over whether she's truly a contender. I know plenty of people that just don't see the hype with her. However, I feel like she's gotten a very consistent presence. She has gotten a lot of personal content. She's gotten a lot of chances to be a narrator. And I feel like while she hasn't had the flashiest edit before this episode, I still feel like she's being set up to be a major character here, but not being overexposed to the same degree as someone like a Drew, for instance. But she still gets a very solid episode here, probably her biggest episode to date, where a lot of it, does feel circumstantial, but she's the one narrating a lot of this idol hunt, where she's obviously catching Austin and Drew, like looking for it. And obviously we see Drew and Austin feeling the need to tell Dee and Julie about all like this to include them on all that. She obviously talks about trusting her intuition, which tells her that something is off. And she is shown being right to a degree here. She obviously is shown like talking about how this is a game of dishonesty, but she feels played. But that gets turned around when Austin and Drew are willing to include her in all this stuff. She obviously ends up being an integral part in finding the idol. And with that, she feels like the hunt proved that there's trust within their alliance, which obviously is pretty good on their end, establishes the alliance as a major force. The fact that she was the one to narrate a lot of this is very solid here. Now, yes, I do still have a lot of questions about like this edit and whether this is genuinely going to be like her winning edit moving forward, or if she's going to fall in line with like the Carolyn's or where she kind of falls off later on. However, I feel like she's still gotten a very solid, a very well-rounded edit up to this point. And while it's not necessarily the most in line with that of the new era, I feel like she's still like being shown to be a major character here. And really, it's the fact that I'm just kind of hesitant about the other top contenders that leads her here in number one. I didn't necessarily come into this week's power ranking having her in number one, but I feel like between the questions surrounding Katurah's edit and whether she's getting too much focus on Bruce, between Emily's edit and whether she's just going to be a big character with a journey edit, or whether she's going to be like a Drew, someone that's very blatantly going to be like a big character that's going to be like the final boss of the season. I feel like that kind of leaves D as someone that on paper is like the most bland of these four, but is also someone that's clearly being set up to do well, probably has the least holes in her edit up to this point. So I feel like with that, like, I guess she's at number one right now, though we'll definitely have to see what happens in future weeks. And for now, I do have her here at number one. And there we go, that will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps out with the channel. And I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so you can stay tuned for that. I'm currently covering Big Brother 25 as well as The Amazing Race 35, so you can expect weekly power rankings of those shows. I am on Patreon now, and if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And if you haven't already, you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that's the video. See ya.